Hello. Is this thing on? We're live. How y'all doing? How you doing?
All right.
This is Gary's Guitars weekly guitar talk. Our weekly guitar get together talking about guitars, guitar thing. This week's guest host is Jake. And Jake works here at the store.
Yeah, that's true.
Some people, and I guess we have to, while we're in the kind of, what's the word? While we're waiting for people, because you got to wait for people to get on and comment, and I'll give some basic, just biographical, Jake turned red, information. So he works here part time at the store. Well, a little more than part time, but not quite full time.
Yeah.
A professional musician playing around the area in several bands. His own band called the Whiskey Stones, or Jake Davis and the Whiskey Stones, depending on how the marketing goes on that.
Shorthand, Whiskey Stones.
Whiskey Stones. So look that up on Spotify later. You play bass. That's you singing and playing guitar. You play bass and Liz Frame and the Kickers.
Yep.
You play lap steel in Marjorie Sent and the Broken Home Boys.
Yep.
All these groups are really great. You should check them out. But he spends his mornings and early afternoons here at Gary's Guitars helping out all you fine people out there. So, there's a couple usuals just chimed in. Dub Delay and Bob Sullivan. How you doing? So that's, and he works at the store mainly because, and this kind of reminded me of something. A customer was in here and they kind of accidentally let leak that they bought a guitar here because we were the store where the nice people work. This was like a teenage girl and her dad. And she goes, I'm glad we bought it at the store where the nice people work. And I was like, yeah, we're the store where the nice people work. And that's and so that's part of the qualification of getting hired to work here.
But don't push us.
Yeah. Don't push that too hard. Yeah. But part of it is just being empathetic and capable of being nice, which not every guitar store has. Especially if your store treats you bad as an employee, then you're just going to be grimacing all day. And not to mention any names. Sitar Genter.
Yeah.
Paul is here. Have a good show. Okay. So Paul chimed in there. So let's talk. So we usually start with one of our own topics, something on our mind, and then get to answering things. Just put some and you love guitar. Yes, it's important to love guitar. So you have to be genuinely interested in the guitar. And you don't have to be knowledgeable. You can learn that as you go. And Jake has learned a lot over the last couple of years. And now we know. I ask him about stuff sometimes. What's the radius on that neck? And he's like, oh, that's So that's cool. But also, just a real interest in the actual instrument itself. And you have to be able to demonstrate an instrument to a customer. That's the other thing that is a qualification. So. My topic for today, and I don't know if you prepared an idea.
No.
I'll go with mine. I want to talk about little amps a little bit and off-brand amps. Anything that's not a Fender amp is essentially an off-brand amp. So you got Fender, you got Marshall. That's the Coke and Pepsi, the Gibson and Fender.
Yeah.
And then you have Mesa Boogie. That's a huge name. What are the other huge names?
Super.
Well, no. Let's talk about the huge name because we're going to disqualify those from being discussed. Vox, maybe disqualify. No, we're going to leave that in. So we're just not going to talk about Gibson because here's why. Because Vox makes some cool little lamps, and I want to talk about little lamps and which ones are cool. My favorite little lamp is made by Vox. I'll talk about it.
I was saying which one's that, but.
It's the we can start with it. The Vox Cambridge. Has anyone heard of the Vox Cambridge?
I only have because I've seen yours.
Yes. It is a tremendous amp. I guess you could say it's a variation of the AC15, the original AC15. But Vox made a bunch of amps after the Beatle craze hit. They made a bunch of amps in North America, and it was made under license by the Baldwin Organ Company, and in California. And they're a little different. They're Vox designs, but made by Baldwin. So there aren't necessarily, European models that are just like them. So this is an American Vox, and it's great. But so yeah, so you said Supro. This is an important thing. So anyone out there watching, chime in with your favorite off-brand or especially small amps.
What are your qualifier for a small
Just something you look at and go, that's cute.
amp? Okay.
Something low power, 15 watt and under, maybe.
All right. I was thinking even less than that. So that's
even the 5 watters and the 3 watters. They're 1 watt amps out there.
mm-hmm.
Someone said Warwick. Does Warwick make amps?
Yeah.
Okay. Especially the old amps. So because we're talking about Supro, it's a legacy brand. Talk about the Supro we had in here that you were tempted to get.
Oh yeah, that was cool. It was what was it? The Delta King 10. So it's a little 5 watt tube amp with a 10-inch speaker. They had built this sort of custom little. It's a small reverb pan, but it had a very long spring sound to it. They put in a little switchable FET drive and a clean boost. And
I didn't realize that drive was in there.
It was just a nifty little thing. It did require some real finessing though to get all the sounds it promised out of it. Where you really had to deal with if you wanted this certain type of clean tone or driven tone in order to get articulation. You would have to deal with the volume being quite low, even though as a 5 watt amp, it could get, unpleasantly loud if you wanted it to, but you lose some of the articulation there. But it was a versatile little thing.
Yeah, and it was used but looked new.
Yeah,
and
we
sold it for $3.99. Yeah, it looks like the old Supro. So that's one way Supro is killing it.
Yeah.
In their design, they've really tapped into the old design attributes.
Being a lap steel player, that look always is attractive to me. I'm a sucker for that.
Yeah, I got one that you've seen that Supro that I got.
Yeah, on the piano, that's nice.
Yeah, that's nice. It doesn't get used enough. I have taken it out on lap steel gigs. Though. That's the one. Look, when you leave, you remember that scene in Pulp Fiction where he goes running upstairs looking for a weapon. Yeah. He's looking around and he sees it, and that's what I was leaving for the pedal steel gig. I was late. I was playing the music hall, the loft there with Guy, and I got the pedal steel in one hand and a bag of stuff. And I don't usually play. Lap steel. I don't usually play lap steel live, and so I was like, well, I need the delay pedal and I need an amp, and I was like, oh. And I took it to the gig and it ruled.
Yeah.
A lot of those amps, especially the old Supros, they got one sound.
Yeah.
It's just a volume knob or a volume and a tone if you're lucky.
I in a pinch, I had a busted power cord for an amp, so I ended up borrowing a friend's little airline amp for steel practice.
Ooh,
and that was really interesting sound.
So Airline Fritz is one of those department store brands.
Yeah.
It was the Montgomery Ward. So Airline is to Montgomery Ward as Silvertone was to Sears.
Mm-hmm.
And those can be super cool. Often made by Valvo. Is it Valvo or Valco? Valvo.
Yeah.
Valvo is the amp maker. Valco is the European tube maker. Get it straight. Get it straight. That's the other podcast. The microphone one. And Sano. Sano made a bunch of those amps too. Let's check in with the room here. Not small, but Ampeg, says Bob Sullivan. Yes, Ampeg made some small amps. That were really cool. The J12.
Mm-hmm.
Tiny. I had one. Was playing it at home. Sounded great. Been playing with my band in my little rehearsal room. And started to smell something. And this fucking smoke starts pouring out of the thing. Turn it off. Everyone else is still playing. They don't know what I'm doing. I grab it and run out of the room.
Yeah.
We've been doing a little drinking, I think, because I just opened the door and threw it in a snowbank and came back inside. And after another hour, I went out. It was in the snowbank, and it was still hot.
Yeah.
From the transformer melting down. Okay, enough of my little tales. What would be a good multi-purpose amp for a home studio? I'm not a guitarist, but I would like to get something that is versatile. What do you think?
I mean, if it was just for guitar, something like that little Supra would be cool for a home space because it was just, like I said, just good tone and a quiet volume.
Quiet volume. Plus, you had a couple of options.
Yeah.
So the Supra Delta King, that was cool. You want something that you can kind of do other things through. If you're doing home recording, like, hey, what if I put this keyboard through an amp? I put my Nord through a guitar amp all the time to get a Wurlitzer sound.
I think that's too what part of what I was so attracted to that amp was the fact that I had a 10-inch speaker too. A lot of the kind of 5-watt amps come with 8-inch speakers, and that would not probably be as great for a keyboard as a 10 would fill it out. So full range a little more.
But sometimes you want it to get
squash.
That's why I plug into a guitar amp. It just makes a high pass filter for you.
Yeah.
Let me check in with the chat here. Oops, my tablet is dying. So it's gone to low mode here. We're in trouble. Alamo Amp, 6-watt 6v6 tube with a 212. Wow, 212s and 6 watts. That's something. Yeah. Alamos were strange and cool, definitely. They fit that category, that third tier category of really cool. The great thing about these little old amps is they just give you a voice that you're not used to. Like, it's like when you're a kid and you like sang into a fan or something. And you're like, wow, that sounds so cool. It's the same thing when you plug into a cool amp that's like weird and limited, but it's like, that's cool. I'm inspired.
Well, even since playing a Fender Champ, I'm aware of the brightness and know that it's going to happen, but it still surprises me and when it reacts, even though I know it's coming. There's just something about it that still jumps out in a different way.
Well, I have a Silvertone, the 1483, is that what it's called? The little TV face one.
Mm-hmm.
And just really limited tone, but interesting tone, for sure. Okay, well, my tablet is dying, so I'm going to have to talk to the people for a second. I'm going to have to rearrange things.
Oh, the good old monologue.
Yes. Monologue for us, Jake.
Oops. Trying to think of what.
Well, we got to mention, I said excluding Fenders, but we got to mention the Champ. You got a Champ, right?
Yeah, we got a Champ. We've been messing around. There's a Fender Vibro Champ in the store. That's been quite fun. I recently learned that one of my favorite artists recorded all his guitar tracks through a Champ on a couple of albums, and that was a surprise to me because there were a lot of different sounds coming through that record.
Let's admit who that is. Let's come out and say it. Yeah.
No, it's a Jeff Tweedy record. One he did with his son, just called under the name Tweedy, but all the guitar parts through that were through a Fender Champ, and that really surprised me. What doesn't surprise me is that it kind of gives you some sort of really standard starting point if you are going to be using a different pedals and stuff. Like, you know that the amp is going to start breaking up at 5. It is just with that, without messing with a master, like having no master volume. I feel like it makes the amp super simple to use, that at a certain point, like exactly where the breakup is.
Well, often, and I say, like, a lot of those amps, it gets louder until you get about halfway up, and then it's just how much nastiness do you want?
Yeah.
Let's see here. Catching up here. Danielle said, I like the DV Mark Little Jazz amp. Small, portable, light, simple controls, and loud enough for a small bar. 8-inch ported speaker. You familiar with that one?
No.
I'm not either. That's cool. Porting is interesting. It's a way to make that little 8-inch speaker just give you a little more oomph in the bass end. So that sounds intriguing. I have to look that up. Crapo Productions says, what do you think of the Fender Acoustasonics? Do you sell a lot of them?
We sell a lot.
The Acoustasonic guitars? Is that what you're talking about?
No,
the Acoustasonic amps.
Little amps.
Is that what they call what that Strat is called? The Strat-like thing. Is that what you're talking about? Crapo?
If he's talking about the amps, we do move quite a lot of those.
The amps are great because they're super cheap for what they are.
And they're very lightweight.
And we sell the 40 mostly because you can also, it has a DI out.
Yeah.
And so you can use it as a mini mixer for your vocal and guitar. And
and with that, it's usually its big competitor here is the Loudbox Mini, which I'm super fond of for that kind of acoustic cafe gig.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
And usually the people just don't want to pay the extra. It's just a little more expensive than the Fender, and they go with that. And none of them have ever come back. So
yeah, right. Yeah. It's a
be
nice
happy with
tool
them.
to have.
Yeah.
Because also has a DI out. So then if you're in a bigger gig, you can add a speaker and just use your same everything. Just have a little extra oomph if you need it.
Mm-hmm. And we do that a lot with the Whiskey Stones, and I use a Roland AC60 for that. I just have a little acoustic amp on stage. It's a little 60 watt. It has two speakers.
Right.
And, does okay.
Yeah. So the Champ, I was saying when I was reorganizing the computer, the Champ is not to be denied. It's a good little thing. Princeton, you can consider low wattage too. 12 watts on a good day. 2.6 V6s. Let's see here. Let me take some other. Oh, maybe like especially considering Danielle's thing about talking about the contemporary amp. What is out there that you can just go in a store and buy that is thrilling for a low watt amp? You said the Supro.
The Supro, we've seen a couple of the little Voxes. Those are cool.
Yeah, the Vox AC4.
There's
one in the store.
The 4, and then we had the 4 hand-wired one that also had a bigger speaker in it and had a little bit of the usual Vox top boost, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
that really I thought kind of screamed for a little amp.
Yeah. Well, I have a 12 watt amp. It's just 2.6 V6s. It is branded Citation, made by Sano, probably. And I always tell when people ask me what wattage, I said I have a 12 watt amp that will make you leave the room.
Yeah.
If I put that on 10, it's just brutal. So there's wattage and there's just like ability to peel paint are not necessarily in the same category. All right, hold on. I'm tuning back into the room here. But no new comments yet. So once again, I'm doing the what do they call that? The sale, the pre-sale. There's a word in radio for this. Welcome to Gary's Guitars Guitar Talk, our weekly get together and talk about guitars show.
Just tuning in.
If you're just tuning in, leave a question or comment. Join the conversation in the comments, in the chat there, or after the fact in the comments, and we'll address that in a later show. Just to talk and communicate. I'm looking down only because my tablet died, so I gotta look at this computer here, and I will do this. Hopefully, the charm of little amps. Do we have that wrapped up now? I don't know. I think everyone stopped talking about it. So yeah. All right. Next topic. If no one else has a topic, the people out in the public are kind of quiet unless my computer is failing me. Let's see here. Top chat. There we go. Let's talk about pedals that get you that sound. Okay, go to Tony pedals.
Yeah, Hot Wax.
Yeah.
The has, gosh, what is it? It's the Hot Tubes is the pedal in itself. That's the side that really emulates that sound.
And it has there's the Crayon and then the Hot Tubes.
Yeah, and then together they're a Hot Wax.
They call it Hot Wax from Electro Harmonics, 2-stage.
Yeah.
That really helps get that. Because you can use your first stage just to warm things up and your second stage to be the angriness. Or just the Hot Tubes, that's the thing that just turns. That's the gain pedal, right?
The Hot Tube.
The Crayon.
The Crayon is the full range one, yeah. And the Hot Tubes is the more.
And the Crayon has a 3-band EQ.
Yeah.
Where you can kind of sculpt it a little as well. Compressors. Oh, thank you for reminding us, Bob, because I talked to Bob earlier this week. We're going to talk about compressors because I just want to talk about it. The problem with compressors is what they do often, if used right, is subtle.
Yeah.
So it's a hard thing to sell to someone.
I think someone put it really well where they're like, I can't always hear it, but I can feel it when it's done right.
Yeah, right.
That was
of the kind of hierarchy of compressors, so everything you hear is compressed. What you're hearing right now has been compressed by YouTube. Compression changes in volume and it changes in intensity. So you can squeak your volume down, but you get the kind of this thickness to the sound. So bass often goes really well with compression. There is no bass on a record that isn't compressed. This goes back to the earliest 60s things. They just, to get the bass up loud enough and to make it present in the recording, it always had to be compressed. Every bass you hear on a recording definitely been compressed. Acoustic guitar is often compressed. Compression is your friend. However, it is subtle. It's sold. I was going to show you my new favorite MXR pedal, but it is out of stock. MXR makes this great thing called the Studio Compressor, which kind of works like a DBX, which is kind of funny because it's that super subtle compression that you can't. It's like, is this thing on?
Yeah.
And if you know how to listen for it, then you know what it is. So why do you need compression? Why do you think you need compression?
Well, it depends on your real intent with it.
Yeah, I mean, use it as an effect. And what I always tell people is the introduction to the Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge is an example of too much compression.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's especially, too. It's just that fingerpick guitar is so fat and present. But if it was being played in a room, not very loud. Yeah. But in that mix, it is squashed
like crazy and right up front. It sounds like it's almost like it's backwards.
It's like normally when you pluck a guitar, especially like with your fingers like that, initially the finger attack is so loud, but on that song, it's just the end of the note is just as loud as the
beginning.
Start.
So the attack, which is the loud part, gets squashed down, made more intense, and then so they're often called sustainers.
Yeah.
So we have the Soul, not Soul Food, Soul Preacher. The Soul Preacher from Electro Harmonics, got it in stock here. That's a good example of a compression sustainer because it helps you create sustain by turning up the end of your note and letting that start to generate that kind of feedback sustain a little more than it would ordinarily. That is a pedal that does, when you press on it does something. The Orange Crush. Are you familiar with the Orange Crush?
No.
That was the MXR. Someone out there can correct me if I'm wrong. Pedal from the 70s that it's basically reeling in the years. If you want the reeling in the years sound, that guitar at the beginning, you get the Orange Crush compressor. But that's a good example of what compression can do to a guitar sound. I think that's what Bob's asking about. He's a guitar player primarily. Yeah. So getting that like super present upfront sound without really keeping it clean, obviously. Although you can compress distortion, but distortion is compression.
Yeah, that is sort of compression in its own.
Yeah. And it creates sustain through that. Now, when we talk about tube amps giving compression, they do.
Yeah.
They do it a couple different ways, but that's one thing that people are like, ooh, I really love tube amps. I don't like solid state amps because a lot of them just have, by nature, compress. By the nature of all those tubes sharing one kind of transformer, and they're all pulling on it at different times in different ways. Of having tube rectifiers, which are, called squishier sounding because they can sag a lot. They don't respond as well as the chip-based rectifiers of today.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Let's check in with the room. Any other compression thoughts? Well, that covers compression. So what compressors to use? The MXR one's really cool, but it's a lot of money.
It's like $200.
$200. They ain't giving it away. Soul Preacher everything's more expensive, folks. The Soul Preacher is a little more money, and that's going to get you that Steely Dan sound kind of thing. Or it's going to. So one thing people use the compressor for is to assist the sustain to happen. and to get a little of that feedback sustain. And that's one that's going to be more out front. The Boss, the Blue Boss, you remember the model number on that? CS2?
I don't
Or
remember.
CS, Compression Sustainer, CS. That's the Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge sound.
Mm-hmm.
You crank that up, and it just goes, and it just like turns your notes backwards. So, and then any other compressors to recommend? The Orange Crush, I said. But do you need compression? Not necessarily, but for certain sounds, it comes in super handy, and it just makes things kind of sound radio ready too. If you want, especially on acoustic guitar, you don't use a compressor live on acoustic guitar.
No,
maybe you should think about it.
I've been thinking about it with this steel guitar because I know that the difference. Yeah. It's just
notes jump out.
Yeah, jump out big time when you start getting in the upper register, and just run it before the volume pedal that way.
Yeah.
Just because sometimes I find myself like backing off after accidentally attacks a little too hard.
Yeah. Whoa, yeah. People jump in the room.
Yeah.
I would say the two instruments I would want to use compression on, bass, it's nice, but if you have a good amp, your amp kind of does that a little bit too, you know. But acoustic guitar really benefits from compression. When you hear it on records, it's there.
Yeah, I mean, like,
it always gets recorded with compression.
The way that I was playing last night would have benefited from that because I had that little percussive hybrid thing going on where it's a little tap, and the tap ends up being a little louder than the note, and you want the note to actually ring. So
if you do that little tap slap thing, especially if you're using the under saddle pickup, because if you're hitting the top of the guitar, you're sending a physical vibration to that pickup that really, you know. But then you need a little more gain, and that's what the compressor has. All compressors usually have some makeup gain. Once you've squashed it down, you got to turn it up after that to get it, and you can use that makeup gain to kind of give yourself as a preamp.
Yeah.
And don't get me started about compressor ratios. Start with 2-to-1, work it up a little bit, and be careful, people. A tube amp supposedly needs to have its speaker broken in for 50 hours or so. What about the Fender Blonde Tone Master Deluxe Reverb? No tubes, break your speaker in? Yeah, let's talk about breaking speakers in.
Oh,
it's a real thing.
Guitar.
Yeah, just play it. So the speaker's made out of paper, essentially, especially if your surround is paper. As it gets moved in and out, it will loosen up that little, where it bends, and it will become more responsive. It will be a little spongier. Now with a new stiff speaker, that's kind of compression too.
Yeah.
So the speakers can compress as well, especially when they get overwhelmed. And then they don't care if you're playing music through them. A speaker doesn't understand music from anything. So you can plug a radio into your amp for the 50 hours if you want. But I'd say, on the Tone Master amps, there's break-in time. Our friend Dan Bella McKenna, he's got a Tone Master twin. We talk Tone Master all the time. We were on a car ride to Portland together to a gig, and we were just talking Tone Master the whole way, because we're, first of all, shocked at how cool they are and how light they are. Mostly how light they are. And, it's a really good little tool. But he's swapped some speakers in and out of it. He's a speaker fiend. He actually tries different, pairings of two different speakers to see what they sound like. And he's an intense guy that way as well. But I think he really mentioned a break-in time for the speaker on that too. So what a speaker break-in time would any amp would benefit from that. Having said that, I've never done it. Just, a new amp sounds good. An old amp sounds good.
Yeah.
An old broken speaker. You want to hear about a broken speaker? Old man Mark's old man stories. All right. So I told you my favorite little amp, the Vox Cambridge. It actually came here to Gary's Guitars on a Saturday when I was working. A regular customer comes in, And I guess they'd just been at Daddy's, and Daddy's offered him $200 for it, and they're like, "We'll try something else." They came into Gary's Guitars. He throws the amp on the counter, and he says, "We want $250 for this, and not a penny less." And I said, "Okay, you win," because I knew what it was. I knew it was cool. It needed work, including the entire speaker was severed. All around the surround was all just kind of ripped in a jagged pattern. And so, but it was okay enough to test it, but it would, rattle around. And so I put a Jensen in, and it sounded terrible in comparison. This was the original Vox Bulldog speaker. I'm like, oh man, that doesn't sound good. So I took off the dust cover, I shimmed the voice coil, I aligned the speaker, and I took rubber cement, and I just glued the whole thing back together with coats and coats of rubber cement around the surround. And I put it back together, and it worked. And I was like, well, I'll go find another Vox Bulldog speaker, and I'll figure out, I'll swap it in, or I'll get this one. I'll get someone to recone this one or something. And that was 18 years ago. That speaker is still in my amp. I took it out once to check on it. It's fine. Put it back in. So if you want to talk about breaking in a speaker, that speaker was literally broken. It still is literally broken all around the surround. It just uses rubber cement to hold it together, and it's working all right.
All ripped speakers sound. That's a fuzz.
Yeah, ripped speakers. That's the famous story that Dave Davies tells of the Kinks. That he claims his brother. Dave. Ray and Dave both claim that Dave played the solo on "You Really Got Me," and that he had cut his own speaker. Now, there's some people say like, "Oh, that's definitely Jimmy Page." They're mistaken, but maybe cutting the speaker was their idea.
Yeah,
I don't know. Jimmy Page seems to kind of remember doing it, but maybe he did the mono single and not the. I don't want to fight with it. The Davies brothers, they fight enough with each other. But yes, a repaired speaker can still last for years to come. Michael Krause says, I'm late again, so welcome, Michael. Paul says, the late Dick Dale surf sound and the low straitjackets did not use any pedals. What gives them the surf sound?
Oh, very loud Fender amps.
Turn it up all the way.
Oh, there's been a kind of a famous story going around the internet too of Marty Stewart, like on must have been Letterman, where someone had asked at the end of their set is, how come you guys get that sound without any pedals? How do you do that? And I'm like, well, we have nice Fender amps. We turn them up. We know how to use them.
Yeah.
And that's that.
So I happen to know Dick Dale's last guitar road manager, who probably doubled. He's not really much of a tech. Laramie Dean. Yeah. He's a friend of the store and old friend, and he's still out in California doing the surf thing. Man, he just put out a single, I think. So check it out. Laramie, like Jeremy with an L. Dean, like James Dean. And he just learned so much from Dick. We got to tour with him. We got to play with him in one of his last. But also, I would say just a lot of Fender amps turned all the way up.
Yeah. And that long spring reverb also cranked excessively.
Yeah. A lot of reverb. I think he used reverb tanks, even though he liked the Fender, the external Fender reverb because it was more reverb-y. Mm-hmm. Or maybe he had them both on or something like that. I remember that's the Dick Dale thing. Those straitjackets are so into gear, they probably just got that. But you only get that sound. Speaking of, I said we weren't going to talk about Fender amps, but you only get that sound with a Fender amp. Yeah. Put the bright switch on, turn it all the way up.
Yeah.
Turn all that. This was, and I think now I might misquote this. Bass player I played with, Brian, was a bartender at the Stone Church in the 80s. And remembered, I thought he said Buddy Guy, but some blues legend was playing at the Stone Church. And they wanted a Fender Super Reverb to be on stage, and they'd show up in the backing band, a local backing band to one of those kind of stories. So he showed up, walked on stage, walked up to the Super Reverb, took his hand and pushed it across all the knobs and turned them all on 10. Yeah. He went, turned around, said 1, 2, 3, 4, and then blew everyone away. So put everything on 10. That's the pedal.
That's Jim Campolongo out of New York does that too, but he plays with a Princeton.
Yeah.
And he has to, a lot of his gigs, turn his amp, point it towards the wall.
Yeah.
Turn it up to
That cuts it down about 20%, but the speaker does not know what direction it should face in. So yeah, that takes out the brutal ouch factor.
Well, and that his hero was Roy Buchanan, and I was recently watching Roy's Austin City Limits, and you can see it's the same thing. That amp is just cranked up, and a couple guys in the front row are just cringing and just from the loud they're marveling at the amazing playing, but fingers are in the eardrums for sure.
Because there's like a laser on those amps. Yeah. And then famously, the Showman was made for Dick Dale. Also because he needed to be even louder. He kept blowing up all the amps that Leo Fender was making him. So he finally figured out how to make a 100-watt amp or something, called it the Showman.
Yeah.
And that's what led him to solid state rectifiers.
Can't even fathom that power.
Yeah. If you see him on stage with all those Showmen lined up, that's a usually you put someone in front of an amp. These days, people they don't have the ears for it. I think we're all sensitive. The Dale Surf sound. It's obvious. Dave Davies. Michael says Dave Davies did the recording. It's obvious. Well, obvious to who? I guess. I mean, it's obvious to you. But I hear the Link Ray cut his speaker. Yeah, Link Ray probably. I mean, that's a thing. Get that treated speakers were a thing really early on in the 60s. So Link Ray, that's a distinct possibility. There's one pedal that gets that Fender Surf reverb sound, but it's as big as a Fender amp. Well, that's the the Fender the spring reverb. That's actually the size of a Fender head, and that will get you that that Surf sound for sure.
I think Fender also just put out this brand new massive double stereo
big pedal,
reverb pedal thing too.
That's interesting. I'll have to look into that because we got a couple. I mean, Fender pedals have let's see. Fender pedal sales have sagged as of late. There was a lot of when they first put out this new line of pedals, a lot of goodwill behind that, and now they're just kind of okay, that's a good one, I guess. So some fresh Fender pedals. Send fresh pedals, Fender, and we're not going to complain about Fender today. No. We had a bad Fender day today. Fender. Well, luckily, and maybe this speaks well of the store. When the guitars come in, we set them all up because a couple of guitars came in from Fender and they were not set up, not ready to play for sure. But we're going to fix them up. We're going to do the setups right, and we'll put them out for sale. They're just so busy, I guess. Chris Paul says just got here. So Chris Lammy, who is a past guest host and a future guest host too, because Chris agreed to do a Beatle show with me.
Nice.
We did a little taste of a Beatle show last week, I think, talking about Beatle amps, Beatle guitars, but we want to go deep, and Chris is way into that.
Nice.
As were the Ramones way into the Beatles. People kind of forget that punk rockers, the original punk rockers, did not listen to punk rock because there was no punk rock.
Well, even Kurt Cobain is famously like, I was trying to write a Beatles song.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the Ramones are big on the Beatles, and also all the punk rockers I know from that first, the Queers guys, and and even a little later would be the Chris's and the Jabbers. They were listening to King Crimson and some prog rock and stuff, whatever was cool on the radio, So so hopefully we'll do a Beatles show soon. Surfy Bear pedal is bigger than your pedal board. The Surfy Bear.
Never heard of that one.
You ain't seen my pedal board. Fender Marine Reverb. Okay, that's the one you're thinking about. 2 layers.
I don't remember. I just remember thinking, wow, that's a large, expensive reverb pedal. I didn't really look into it.
Well, I think that the Strymon company were the first to realize that people will pay way too much money for pedals. Because Strymon's they're probably $400 new now, 400 something, and they got some good reverbs, and people will spend the extra money to get good sounding pedals. And no one even imagined when DoD, Boss, and who was the other big legacy? Ibanez or Maxon pedals. When all those pedals were about a little under $100 each.
Yeah.
Every pedal. There wasn't a pedal. I remember the first pedal that was more than $100. The DoD digital delay was like $129. It was like, holy crap, $129 for a pedal.
I will say that one of the best guitar tones I've heard in my life was when I was doing sound a couple weekends ago, and the guitar player just, granted, exceptional hands and talent.
I was playing
there.
piano on that gig.
Night before that.
Okay.
Good one. He did just have a volume pedal, tube screamer, which I'm personally not fond of.
Yeah.
It was the Strymon, like Flint, I think, the reverb tremolo thing that they have, and then just a delay and a chorus, and everything. It was just a small little board, but that was some of the most beautiful tone that I'd heard. So, and
having talked about these pedals things, sometimes plugging right into the amp is a special sound, and there's reasons for that. Because when you plug into a pedal, it becomes a buffer. It takes your 7,000 kilo ohm. No, 7 is a kilo. 7,000 ohm pickups, and it takes them down to a different impedance, and it amplifies it. It does a thing, and it spits out something out the other end. But direct connection between your guitar and your amp is going to have the highest impedance signal going to your amp, which is going to trigger your amp in a certain way.
Yeah.
So that's maybe that's why Dick Dale sounds so good. My other slight pedal story, now we're talking about seeing great guitars. David Hidalgo from Los Lobos, one of my favorite guitarists, one of my favorite bands. Saw him playing live. He does this thing on the records where he has this sound that sounds like an amp in a bathroom, and I just assume they put an amp in a bathroom, like a tiled room, like a really quick delay echo. But he was getting that sound live. I've seen him like 3 or 4 times, but this one night he's really getting that sound. I was like, I got to figure this out. So I went up to the edge of the stage after the show to kind of look over to see the pedals, thinking there's going to be some boutique-y thing, just Boss pedals.
Well, even I had like this really cheap delay pedal, but I was going for that kind of thing. Just sounded like amp in a bathroom sound. Yeah, and it sounded great. Really surprised that it even sounded that good for a $40 pedal. Yeah. The only thing is it did blow up, so maybe that was the cost point there. I got a couple years out of it.
Yeah. Well, you can get another one. Right? Yeah. You can get it fixed for $80. Yeah. Send it back, get it factory. See if you can get a factory rebuild. Was it a Behringer pedal by any chance?
TC.
There's some funny. Yeah, TC's Behringer. You know that? No. Yeah. Willie Behringer owns TC. He just made a different name brand so he could kind of fancy it up a little. Yeah,
checks out.
Yeah, that's what you get, that Behringer quality. Yeah. There's some good Behringer pedals. I think the JHS show did a Behringer show. Are you familiar with that? Yeah. So talking about which Behringer pedals are good, because there are some.
I mean, we've joked before. Everybody's got some piece of Behringer gear.
Yes, exactly. You know it. Everybody has got a piece of Behringer gear. There's a city in China called Behringer, because Behringer owns a city that we're all, and not only that, but Behringer makes the chips that are in everyone else's stuff. Behringer's like a complete manufacturer. But what is the piece of the piece of Behringer gear? This is something to ask the audience as well. Let us know the one piece of Behringer gear in your studio / guitar thing, the thing that you are a little ashamed of, but
for me, I guess I'm really not that ashamed of it, but it's just the little mixer, little handy mixer.
Yeah. Those are great. Those are handy.
But I've had to go through a couple of them where they're $50 new, and if you break the power supply, which is often fails, you can get a new one for like $35. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, but in a pinch, it's helped with a lot of different things, like doing little cafe shows when I was getting started. But now, because it works, I just have held on to it, and I've had weird situations of like routing headphones or just having a situation of needing a little mixer for something.
Yeah, a little extra preamping. They're handy, even if you don't have the Behringer one. There's some others. Alesis makes one. Mackie makes one. They're all essentially the same thing. Well, the Behringer's kind of famous for having cheap pots that do wear out. But I have
someone gave me a Behringer compressor that I have used, but don't really use.
Let's see if I
haven't gotten rid of it yet either, though.
Come on, people, admit to your Behringer ways. I'm looking down here on the chat. No Behringer confessions.
Just me.
Just you. How about let me think of my Behringer gear. A Behringer patch bay. I had a Behringer patch bay because they were $49 when all the other patch bays were $200.
Yeah.
And so that was my first patch bay. Was a Behringer patch bay, and it wasn't balanced, but oh well. Everything worked. But they're not known for the quality of their connectors, which that's the ironic part.
Yeah.
That's that usually is the downfall of the Behringer stuff. I have the Behringer clone. Here's a real confession. The Behringer clone of the Electro-Harmonics, what's it called? Small clone.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a phaser.
Yeah.
And it kind of looks like it. They even made the case kind of look like it. And now that we're an Electro-Harmonics dealer and we're friends of those guys, I feel almost bad having the knockoff. But I got it, and I tried a bunch of them, and I like that one. Mm-hmm. Because, and I don't know what this is getting back to Mike Matthews, or he'll sick the electrosphere on me.
Yeah.
But when he gets superpowers, we're all in trouble. Look to a previous episode for that story. But Mike Matthews will have superpowers before it's all over. It was quieter than the Electro-Harmonics one. Electro-Harmonics one has slow. And in the studio, you don't want.
Yeah.
And it's the Rhodes, because after the Rhodes, you put a Rhodes into that, and then you got to crank because Rhodes are so quiet. So a quiet input and an output that was no louder going to something else, an output that's probably quieter. And so I had to crank it too hard, and it was doing a little hissy hiss. Maybe I had a bad one. Maybe I should not talk about that. But I admit to a $20 Behringer fuzz pedal because it's a Boss FZ2 copy. Yeah, Behringer is not ashamed to copy stuff.
Yeah.
And some of it is just fine. We can no longer sell Behringer even if we wanted to, or TC. They've decided to only sell direct to giant stores, and that's it. The online, catalog stores, Guitar Center, Sweetwater, all those stores, all 4 of them, and that's it. Tomman probably.
Yeah.
They're not going to bother with stores like us anymore. They're like, you only buy 4 at a time.
Yeah.
Here. Or they're not selling to our distributors either. So I had several Behringer mixers that all died on me. I gave away the 48-channel Behringer mixer. The case was worth more than the mixer. Yep, power supplies on those. Not, that's a well-known problem.
Yeah.
I don't feel bad about a copy if they don't make the original. Well, yeah. If they're not making it look exactly like the original or something. It's a tribute.
Well, I mean, a lot of the pedal manufacturers are not ashamed to admit what they are emulating either. Like all those Tomline thing descriptors are like much like
that's
modeled after this.
Or remember the Wrath pedal?
Yeah,
that was clever.
Yeah, it was clever.
Yeah, so WRATH.
Yeah,
and you take the W and the H off, and it's a rat.
Yeah.
So, and the rat had bigger capital letters or something. Yeah. And it's so funny that we're copying the rat. The rat was like the most commonplace every day. It was Proco. They weren't even a real pedal manufacturer. It was probably the only pedal they made. They mostly made direct boxes. It was sold only or mostly in little mom and pop stores. And now everyone's arguing over which rat is best. Let's see, any other Behringer confessions? All right. So we covered pedals. We covered not using pedals. This is a lot happening in this show. Why to use pedals? Why not to use pedals? Why to use a loud amp? Why to use a quiet amp? What other contradictions should we introduce the people to?
Well, that's part of the fun of music, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just the paradox of there's all these rules, and then the best music throws the rules out the window.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So,
The amazing sounds you get just on crap gear or whatever gear you have around. The best gear is the gear you have. Just make music.
yeah.
Because that's the other thing I talk about this with Gary all the time here, and that is that like it's all this gear is fine. I mean, there used to be a time when inexpensive guitars or inexpensive pedals were junk, and they're not.
Yeah.
The $49 Tom's Line pedals are fine. They're dependable. They're quiet. They work well.
Yeah.
You can still get Electro Harmonics pedals for around $100. They're all great. So it's what you make of it. All right. Let's see if there's anything from the room. The room is being quiet. The room has gotten a hush.
Do you have any like painfully cheap instruments that you've used in a professional setting that you're ashamed or not ashamed of?
In a professional, like in front of people or in the studio?
Well,
because in front of people, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, in front of people would be one story, and the studio would be another.
Yeah.
I feel like the studio is way less.
You're allowed.
You're way more. Yeah, I mean, we hit brake rotors and stuff for percussion.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's good times. Yeah, I had at one time I had a dream of getting a brake rotor in all 12 notes of the scale.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, because I had a neighbor who had a garage, and he had just a pile of like worn out brake rotors.
Mm-hmm.
I was over there one day whacking on with a drumstick trying to find it, and he was looking at me weird. It was his recycle pile. It's not like he was gonna. Bulgara AC30 amp is interesting to compare to the AER Compact 60. No, AC60. So you can speak to the Bulgara, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've only
Speaking of embarrassing gear you've used in public.
Yeah. I've only had the 5-watt Bulgara.
Yeah.
And
which is a great bargain.
Speaking of little amps, yeah. Oh, that served the purpose that I needed it to serve.
Yeah.
Like, its purpose is kind of no longer.
Yeah.
But I just needed a little amp. I want a little tube amp to just with my first electric guitar.
Yeah, back when no one should have heard what you were playing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when you had the amp no one could hear.
Yeah. So it was fun. That's definitely a fun amp, but I worked it way too hard.
Yeah.
I definitely just abused it.
But the Bulgara, this obviously 60-watt amp, I guess, AC60.
Yeah.
Probably pretty nice.
Yeah.
I actually went back a half hour ago during the amp talk. I was talking with Supro, like killing it. And I wanted to be a Supro dealer. And I talked to them, and there's so little markup. Like you got to buy an amp for $600 and sell it for $700. And then you got to take a credit card, and there's a $25, and then you got to warranty it. And I was like, I just can't sell these things.
Yeah.
You got to pay to have it shipped to you. There's another $25.
Yeah.
So how about no amp? I once plugged an active pickup guitar into an 18-inch bass cabinet. It worked kinda. Yeah, preamp's an amp.
Yeah,
it's a watt maybe. Yeah.
I would say when I was a youngster, I just run my acoustic guitar into my bass amp all the time.
Yeah, no, he's not talking about the bass amp. He's just talking about directly to the speaker.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. That is that would work. It's preamp is a kind of amp. It might get you a watt. So if you had a really efficient speaker, it could get loud. Maybe that's the next big craze in small amps that have no amp, passive amplifiers. Wait, I'm working on this thing here. Hold on, this is going to be good. Passive amplifiers. I don't know exactly how it's going to work. I guess with transformers, you're just going to use a series of step-up transformers until you get your signal loud. The problem with Supro is every year they used to heavily discount stuff at the end of the year. Good way to kill a small dealer. Yep, they had huge sales. That also kind of when I was just doing the research on it. And so, but of the third, of that, second tier, third party, whatever, tube manufacturers, amp manufacturers, they're doing fine. And they use some of the cool, weird tubes that they used to use. It's not just 6V6s and 6L6s. They use some of those cool, weird tubes they had. So that's kind of cool. So basically, to wrap up the small amp thing, if you see a small amp, buy it. And if you don't want it, come here and sell it to me. Because small amps are the future. Everyone comes in every day. Someone sent me a message online. There's customer's been here a few times. I got this Marshall stack that was used by, insert name here, some pro guy. There's only 10 of these ever made. The last one I saw sold for $5,000. I want to sell it. Do you want to buy it? And I was like, no.
Yeah.
How am I ever going to sell a $5,000 Marshall stack? I can sell, we sell the $1,000 Princeton, like whenever we got one. We don't have any anymore. They're sold out.
Even just our general 4-buys go to like very particular customers.
Yeah, very particular customers are still, you play metal or hard rock or whatever, but everyone comes in. Someone came in, looked at a blue. They said, I want a small amp. I'm like, well, here's the Blues Junior. No, that's too big. It's like, if the Blues Junior is too big, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah.
All right. So is it time? It's about time for the wrap it up. Anyone else out there have anything they want to talk about? So remember to like and subscribe. That's important here on YouTube. Go to Instagram and like us and comment on stuff. It just YouTube and Instagram just like when things are happening in your presence. So come back next week for the return of Gary again. Gary wants to do less of these, but he's still going to do them. And then we're going to have another guest host. We've got some of our fabulous rotating guest hosts, including a thank you to Jake Davis. And now it's time for you to go to Spotify and check out his music. It's either under Jake Davis or the Whiskey Stones or Liz Frame and the Kickers or
Marjorie Senate and the Broken Homeboys.
Yeah. So, that's the wrap it up. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week. Come by the store if you're in the area. Stop by, say hi, check out the other YouTube videos. And as always, what? Keep playing.
Yeah.
See ya. Stand by for the end. That says always.